I have like a little bit of experience both at GoDaddy and in my schoolwork building React Django apps, and it's a combination that I really, really love. So I hope you like the presentation. Why React? In my humble opinion, it's a lot easier to learn React than just vanilla JavaScript. And it's definitely a lot easier to read. I don't know about you, but like I've gone into applications where somebody else has wrote it and there's just jQuery everywhere and you're trying to find out which function goes where, and it's just like, what's going on here? React kind of eliminates that. It's incredibly easy to read. It's incredibly efficient. It creates a virtual DOM that's stored in memory, and then it compares the virtual DOM to like previous virtual DOM to like calculate the minimum number of changes needed to like change the actual DOM, and that like really increases the efficiency. And it's really great for search engine optimization. Like if you have a very JavaScript heavy application, it doesn't. Search engine optimization, while it's getting better, it doesn't really read your website too well. React fixes this a lot. And it has really great developer tools. If you go on like Chrome and Firefox, you can look at like the syntax as if it was just normal like developer tools. They have like a specific extension you can add. It's amazing. It's responsive. I honestly can go on for ages. There's also React Native, which we were talking about earlier, that a lot of us ported over to Android and iOS apps. So I already have a Django template. Why would I move it to React? Back up.
Slide. It didn't change.
Oh, yes. Gotta do it both times. So components, as opposed to templates, are much more decoupled, isolated, and testable than templates. Django templates tend to fall short when trying to maintain like a very complex state within the browser and like a single state application, single page application. And Django or jQuery used to be the standard to use with Django and add interactivity. But as single page web apps become standard, maintaining intricate jQuery logic isn't really the best practice anymore. So basic React vocabulary. Oh, yes. First of all, could you like raise your hand if you've like used React or feel comfortable with React more or less?
Not quite comfortable. It's fine here.
So I'm gonna go over like a few basic vocabulary for those who haven't really like used it too much. There's components, properties, and states. Components kind of let you split the UI into independent, reusable pieces. And it allows you to think about each piece in isolation, similar to like classes within Java. And they're actually used with classes. And they're displayed like HTML elements. So if you were writing this in code, you could just use a component like example. Similar syntax, it's very easy to learn. Properties are inputs, and they should remain constant within the thing. So a property should never change, and it's passed in within the components. So example, property 1 equals value. States are initialized in the constructor and are meant to change throughout the application. And they determine how the component renders and behaves. It's updated by calling this .set state and with the name value. And states could be used like if you have a text box, you could have the state change for every time somebody clicks within it. So it could be constantly updating what's inside that text box. So the tools that we'll be using. Obviously React and Django, but in addition to that, we'll be using Babel, Webpack, Node.js, and NPM. They'll come together to help us build and integrate React and Django. So what about existing jQuery? So if you already have a single page or a multi-page application with Django, you probably have a good amount of jQuery. But adding a library such as jQuery adds a lot of overhead to the application, which really impacts the load for users. And everything that can be accomplished with jQuery can be done really easily with React or just with vanilla JavaScript. And React is unaware of the changes made to the DOM outside of React because of this virtual DOM concept. So if you have jQuery elements changing things that React is also looking at, React won't understand what's going on, and you have an error in communication. It can cause a lot of debugging errors where it's very, very hard to find. And if you really do need something like jQuery, there's a lot of lightweight alternatives such as Minifield.js and Zepto.js that use a similar syntax to jQuery but don't have as much overhead. And in conclusion, burn it with fire. I just really wanted to include this GIF, but yeah, you can either take piece by piece and integrate it with React, or take like this piece of jQuery is doing this, I'm gonna change it with React. Or you could just rip out everything and change it to vanilla JavaScript and then slowly integrate React like that. I personally recommend the first way, but I've had people on teams that have done it the second way as well. So let's get started. First things first, we're going to install Node.js in npm. So this is using Ubuntu, but if you were to use CentOS, you would just replace apt-get with yum. And Node.js is a JavaScript library. npm is the package manager for Node.js, but it also does some additional things as well. So we'll be using npm to pull various libraries, such as React, and to help build our JavaScript files from the ReactJS syntax. So then once we have npm and node installed, we're going to run npm init. And I would recommend running this on the same directory that holds your manage py file. And the reason for this is that we're going to be running some commands that need this package.json in it. And it makes it a lot of effort to move back and forth from directories. And yeah, so it asks you some questions, and it honestly doesn't really matter what you enter in for any of these things. It just holds in the package, but the package is really helpful, and you'll see why in a few slides. So next we're gonna install Webpack with npm. So this is the basic syntax for installing a package with npm. The save dev and save in package.json is incredibly useful and really nice. So it saves it in the package JSON. So then if you're uploading this code to Git, somebody else can download it and just run npm install, and it'll automatically install all of the necessary libraries that are in the package, npm package JSON. And we'll look at the structure in a little bit. So we're going to create a webpack.config.js, and we have to take note of the entry and output. So the entry are all of the files that are in your JSX format and the output is going to be where you want these JavaScript files to go. So you're going to want to put this in whatever folder has your static files. And the file name is just built from, this would be index-build.js, and that can automatically update and store them in your static files. So next, package.json as promised. Except for the build value and scripts, this is all automatically generated, and the dependencies. So when we do save dev and save, it adds the package into the dependencies. And then under scripts, I added build. So webpack --progress --profile --colors. And this is how we're going to build our application. So then once this is added, we can run the command npm run build, and it'll do that building for us, but not yet. First, we need to install Babel and create a Babel RC file. Babel is going to convert to ES 2015, which allows our JavaScript to be viewed on multiple browsers. And yeah, it compiles ES6 and React. And you basically initialize your Babel RC file like that. And finally, we're going to install React. The same structure as before. You save dev, and you get this nice little, there's some warnings. You can kind of ignore those, probably. It works. Where to put React code? My personal recommendation would be just to create a separate folder called React and put your JSX files in there. If you don't have to, you can honestly put it wherever you wish, but that makes it really easy. They should all be in the same directory.
So it's a Python program.
Yeah, so in the same, yes?
Oh, it's all front end, right? So can you put it into a CDN, the React code? Like, can you minify it and then put it into?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes. And yeah, usually the way I have it is I have a folder for React, and within that folder, a separate folder for components. And we'll get to that in a little bit. So we have this Django template for an app that definitely already exists. You can see. I kind of started this from scratch, but it's just as easy to take an existing one. All you have to do is add the span, and you can name the ID whatever you want, but it has to be unique because you're going to be grabbing that from the React. And yes. And I'm going to create a file called index.js, which is inside of our React folder. And this is the file where we're going to be placing our components on the page. I'm just going to use a div right now as an example to test, but we'll add a component in a little bit. And it renders and it places the document in get element by ID React test. It occurs to me now that I definitely missed a step, but back in this file, I needed to add a script where you pull the JS script index.build.js. It will show up later, magically. Yeah, so we do npm run build that takes from the package JSON and compiles your index build down here. It compiles it very nicely into a nice index-build.js that is placed in your static folder as mentioned in your webpack config. So it works. Very responsive, viewable on any browser. And now we're going to add some React components so we don't just have some random div, because why use React to add a div? Within the React directory, we're going to create a new directory called components, and here we can create different components that can be easily placed into our web app from index.js file. You don't need to create a new directory for this. I just find it easier to see. You can organize this however you want. So this is the syntax for a basic, very basic React component. We have props here, so you would do this.props for any props passed in, and this.state. I initialize it to none. I just kind of threw this in to show you, but this is where your state would go to initialize. And I'm just going to return a basic div with a header, welcome to React, and export default class test extends React component. Default isn't necessary, but if you don't use default, you need it to put test in brackets when you import it in your index here. So we import test from components test.js and we render it, putting it in that nice little place. Welcome to React. Very beautiful, I know. I'm a front-end master. So we're going to level up these React components. There's a ton of open source libraries to help with creating very attractive components, or you can create your own. And I'm going to give a quick example using Material UI, which is Google's material design. So I npm install it. And wow, that's a lot of code, but it took me like 30 minutes to write, which is pretty fast considering what it is. And half of it is hard coding because I was too lazy to initialize the database. But yeah, so we import, all this can be seen in documentation for material UIs, but I'm setting, some things to note is I'm binding some functions together. And basically by binding a function, it sets to this. So you can use it inside a component, like there. And setting states is selected. And everything that goes into your render is what will be rendered. And part 2, more of our render function, render function. This is not handle row selection, is bind it up in the constructor. And it's been reactified. With some nice material UI. And additional notes. Make sure that your static files are set up properly in settings UI, and this is what mine look like. You have to set the static file strs. And that basically, and the static URL has to be static, or whichever URL you're gonna have, or directory. There's a really nice browser extension in Chrome and Firefox that allow you to debug React with developer tools. And you can pass data from Django to React, either with an API, or you can have global JavaScript variables set in a script within the HTML or the template, and the React can grab those if it's placed on that same page. So both of those can be used to pass data back and forth. API is recommended, but sometimes you need a different way, or it's just one value and you don't want to create an API for one value. And you
A
can
template means Django template?
Django template, yeah. So yeah, Django templates are kind of pre-components. It's like an HTML file, but split up into different pieces. And you can add in Python React element or Django elements with special syntax. And
Does the version of Django matter for React compatibility?
I don't believe so, because it just pulls the JavaScript as if it was static. And yeah, conclusion, React and Django are the perfect combination. Django lets us have a very intricate backend while maintaining the best possible front end, which is like a very modern. It's reactive and amazing, and I love it. Integrating React into Django requires very few tools, and then once it's set up, it's very easy to maintain and build up. And using React to Django adds a whole library of open source code that helps you build your app, such as Material UI. And at the end, I like the cat and the pun. Yes.
So I'm just wondering, have you messed with, instead of using Django's template, using Webpack's like dev server?
I have not.
Okay, and just serving the HTML that way and avoiding any Django template.
That would probably, I built this kind of as how to integrate it
Okay,
to an existing application.
okay.
So integrating into existing, I
Yeah,
definitely recommend templates, but I haven't looked into Webpacks at all.
Okay.
Have you?
Yeah,
How is it?
I like it. That way you keep your Django just as your API only, and then the front end and the dev server spins up like an express server to like actually so you can test everything.
Yeah. I'll definitely look into that. Yes.
So at my last company, they would not let us touch React because of the terms and conditions. So Facebook made React, and then the lawyers told us that inside the terms and conditions that if we built an app using React and if we ever fought Facebook legally, they could actually go in and claim parts of our app because it had React code into it. Now, as a bigger company like at GoDaddy, how would you go about incorporating React code into your app without any of that stipulation?
I have no idea, but I've done it here.
They removed that,
Okay, that's good.
so it's just MIT or BSD now.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was going to say, as GoDaddy standardized on ReactJS and Django, it was probably already reviewed by legal And so I would imagine it would have to have passed muster at that point. But that's just inference.
So on the React side, I usually have my whole backend as separated by an API layer. Usually use Django REST framework.
Yes.
Is there anything that is different on the React end to access that API, or that I need like some CSRF header or?
I use Axios as my kind of like tool to access APIs, but you can pretty much use anything. You don't need any specific headers or anything to access it. It's pretty much JavaScript or JavaScript imports that you can use. React doesn't need anything specific. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah.
Do you have any project to run quickly?
Yeah, I can. Give me a second.
I can see the
I
flow.
think,
It had to do only with had
yeah.
your React front